What up, everyone? Don't forget Rocky Mountain BJJ and Mindset Retreat is happening March 17th. Be one of the first 10 to sign up and you will get $200 off. Go to the website, elliottmarshall.com, click on programs, click on retreats, and there it will be. 7 hours of jiu-jitsu, mindset training every day, a nice Rocky Mountain excursion, 2 meals included per day. elliottmarshall.com, programs, retreats. Use the code EARLYROCKY to get that $200 off. What's up, guys? This is former UFC fighter Elliot Marshall, and you are listening to The Blueprint. I believe that there's a blueprint of how the most successful people structure their lives. They don't all do it the same. They don't all do the same things. And on this podcast, you're going to hear inspirations, motivations, and stories about how they go through their life. These stories will give you clues and tricks of exactly how you can discover your passion, find your power, and then go give your purpose to the world. Thank you so much for listening. Let's jump into this week's episode. This episode of the podcast is with Abel James. Abel James has been in the health and coaching industry for over a decade now. He has a very successful podcast, The Fat Burning Man, a book by the same title. We talked about everything from health to research to what you should eat and things like it. It was a great talk, you know? So he is one of the leading figures in this industry of probably what I would call reasonable information, you know, nothing too crazy. So I hope you all enjoy. Here we go, Abel James. Abel, what up, man? How are you?
Elliot, thanks so much for having me, man. It's great to connect.
Man, thank you. We were just talking offline a second ago. First of all, on this nonsense, I'm trying this new software, and you were very kind to assist in my attempts because I butchered it yesterday. So thank you.
We have all been there, especially after the past 3 years or so with all these Zoom meetings and various calls from all over the place, and people can't get together in person like they used to. It's a mess, dude. It's been a mess for years, and now it's like only worse because there are even more different platforms where they need permission to get your video and your audio for different browsers, and it's a mess every time. Been doing this for more than 11 years, and it's always been a mess. So good for you if you're just plowing through.
Look, and I said to you too, I'm terrible at it. I'm awful at anything, at all of this. I can teach jiu-jitsu. I can cook a damn good steak. And I'm a good dad. So outside of this, everything's up for grabs.
Hey, that's the stuff that really matters. And you can figure out the tech bullshit whenever you want to. There's enough time to figure all that out. What I figured out, though, and I appreciate that you have this too, is you got to have a backup. And you got to have a backup for your backup. You have to have all sorts of contingency plans. And as long as you do, you can kind of get through anything.
I agree. Man, you said that you've been in the space for 11 years, that you're in. What's the space?
That is an excellent question because I can't totally define when I started. It depends on how you sum all this up. But anyway, I would say I kind of became a full timer in terms of my vocation being around the world of health a little more than a decade ago. And I first started as an athlete who was never pro or elite level, but I've always been a runner and really, really enjoyed that. And so I was doing everything that I could to get my body composition in check back then, about 12 years ago. And by doing so and trying to follow the running magazine so hard, that tells you how long ago it was. It was like reading running magazines.
You were reading. You weren't listening. You were reading.
Like, what's a magazine? But anyway, I got fat by trying to get skinny. And that was something that really pissed me off, but only after I lost the weight by doing the opposite. So I had been trying to optimize my health by avoiding dietary cholesterol, staying away from red meat, and the typical things back then that a lot of people thought were healthy. And I put on a good 20, 30 pounds, which really affected my running and made my joints hurt and all sorts of things. So it wasn't until I did a bit of research into the world of health of my own and got over that fear of eating fat and red meat and some of these other things, that it would stop my heart, that all of a sudden I got shredded down to like single percentage body fat. And it only took like a month and a half to kind of get where I wanted to be and start setting all these personal bests again. And I was pissed because I had gotten fat and flabby and my performance got way worse because I was trying to improve it and trying a lot harder than my friends around me who kind of didn't care as much. And they're in their early 20s, and they're doing okay despite the fact that they're partying, they're having fun. And I'm like being diligent about it, putting on weight because I was trying so hard.
And how old were you?
I was in my early 20s as well, but had the body of a middle-aged kind of like 40-something with a fat face, pudge around the belly and all that. And then I wasn't used to that because that hadn't happened to me.
But really were you running? Were you running a ton?
Oh yeah, I was running about 30 miles a week throughout that.
So your shape was good. Like your conditioning was good.
Yes, my conditioning was definitely good. But if you have extra fat in the wrong places, then your performance is going to suffer big time. The strength to fat ratio wasn't there until I honed that in. And one thing that really helped too wasn't just being less afraid of food, but also embracing going without food, intermittent fasting. I started doing 16-8 pretty hardcore back then and had some great results right away, pushing breakfast out until later in the day. And then really experimenting with all sorts of more fringe approaches than following what the doctors said, what the running magazines and blogs and what the supplement companies were telling me and all the rest of it. It's like, no, you kind of have to decide what works for you and try it. Try a bunch of different things. Try stuff that doesn't work. Fall on your face, and then you'll know where you're at.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the whole deal right there, right? Like that's all of this. Is everyone thinks, you become, and I agree, you become an overnight, you become an overnight success in 10 years. It might literally just happen. And that's how the public sees it, right? Like the public sees it like, yo, that dude blew up all of a sudden, like who blew up?
And that's what happened too.
Yeah.
When I all of a sudden, my podcast back then, it was just like, boom.
Yeah.
But it was playing live shows for 10 years before that.
10 years. Right. I guess I'm trying to get into this speaking thing. I'm trying to, I really enjoy speaking, companies, all this stuff. And, people are like, have you practiced? Or, the first talk I ever gave was a TED talk, right? That was a
great talk. I was just watching that. I thought it was excellent. You had me fooled anyway.
But it's not the first talk I ever gave. I've been teaching martial arts since I was 6 years old, since I was 13 years old. And the instructor has to talk at the end of class.
Yep.
Right. So I've been honing this skill since I was 13. Right. It's not the first talk I ever gave. It's the first talk that the public ever saw. Right.
Right.
In a major sense. And people think that, oh my God, you just boom. No. Somebody heard me talk after years and years of speaking, like, oh, that dude should try a TED talk, right? Or a TEDx. I know they get all particular about this. And then I got it, right? So 15 years later, just like you, all of a sudden, boom, podcast. Who else? Jordan Peterson, I was going to say. And like him or don't like him, everyone's like, oh, that dude just blew up. Man, he's been talking in front of classes for 2 or 3 decades. He's 50-something years old. Right. It's like and dealing with patients, and he's 50-something years old. He blew up at 55.
Isn't that crazy?
He had a normal everyday life, and then all of a sudden, boom. So yeah, overnight success. All of us.
That's the other thing is like the normal everyday life doesn't really come back, at least not right away. If you do have that blow up experience, I'm sure you can relate to that.
It's interesting, right? It's interesting. It's interesting to get recognized. My big thing was it was interesting to get recognized.
Yeah.
And then it made me have like empathy for like, and you or I combined, plus everyone we know combined isn't Michael Jordan. Right.
Right.
But dude, that dude can't even go to a restaurant, I bet.
Exactly. I never felt for Justin Bieber before. I never felt bad for all the antics that these people who kind of blow up at a young age, these child actors who come out deranged at some point, because they're battered around by life. Because they've never known a world where people don't want something from them in a way, right? And I was on a ABC television show, one of those weight loss competitions, and I was the coach. This was back in 2015, 2016. And that show was like primetime ABC. And it was called My Diet is Better Than Yours. It was supposed to be kind of like ABC's version of The Biggest Loser, but more positive. And there were certainly a lot of antics involved in it. But what was super weird for me is before that, my podcast blew up in 2012 or so. And so it had already been kind of big for a while. And the people who recognized me for that knew what I did.
Oh, God, you're like Joe Rogan. You're like first to the game.
It was weird because back then it was different. There weren't that many games in town, and I was one of them. Yeah. There was like Rogan, there was Bulletproof Radio, there was us, the Fat Burning Man. The Fat Burning Man Show is what I named the podcast all the way back then, and that's what it's still called. And it's like totally tongue in cheek in a lot of ways, but we have serious people on, a lot of thought leadership. But I figured I've been a career musician this whole time. That's kind of what got me into podcasting, and the running and health thing was always a hobby. But then once that blew up, it was kind of all consuming. And the people who would recognize me back then, it was very cool because they had listened to the long form conversations. They knew what I stood for and all that. The people who saw me though on ABC TV, they were just running up in this, like slamming the brakes on the cars. I'm like walking the dog with a bag of shit in my hand, just trying to find a trash for it. And people are slamming on the brakes like, Abel James, how's it going? And, just going to the grocery store, trying to pick out, something that I don't want people seeing me eating or whatever. Because we all enjoy.
Like, dude, I like a fucking candy bar too sometimes.
Yeah, but they're just like taking selfies on Instagram or whatever, or live streaming. And I'm like, hey man, I'm just going shopping. Can you say hi first? So it was a weird experience. And now that's
how weird is that, right? When somebody takes a picture of you, right? Like, and not with you, of you. You see him like, and you're like, yo, dude, no, like, no, come over. We can take a picture together, but you're not taking a picture of me. That's too weird.
It gets weird. But now we all live in this world. Like, you don't even have to blow up anymore for that sort of thing to happen, because that's almost the expectation with social media and this new just technology and photos and videos being everywhere. So it can be a strange experience for everyone to have that feeling that you're always being recorded, especially on video.
Yeah, but for most people, there's no consequence to it. Even for me, most of the time, there's no consequence to it, right? But for really famous people, there's massive consequence to it, right? Like you get recorded, and then it can just have a life of its own, so
it can.
Which can be good or bad, I guess. I'm not sure. Like Trump did it in a great way. He just made so much shit and threw it at the fucking wall that you couldn't keep up with him, right? Like
that's one way to do it.
Yeah, it was one. I mean, I'm not recommending it. I don't like it, but like, fuck. I mean, if you've got that much, like, whenever I slip up, I always like to say, I'm just trying to Trump, like. So when I run for president, you guys won't be able to keep up with what with all the bad, stupid shit I said.
That's the weird thing too, is like you can get away with whatever game it is you're playing as long as you stay consistent to that game, right? The people who have the wrong persona and step outside of that persona and are busted for it, it's like they go down for the smallest thing. But the people who kind of stand behind the fact that they're a total asshole or whatever, they get away with it. It's interesting.
You see fighters do this. Fighters talk all this shit, right?
Totally.
They're on this shit talk train, like on all over their social media. And then they go get knocked out and then they just leave it. They're just done. They're, and it's like, no, dude, you had to keep that up. Like, no, because now you are just like Colby Covington. He actually is a nice guy from what I've never met him, but he's actually a nice human being from what I understand. And it's like his thing is just a shtick. A stick. So, which I find the two put those two things together kind of hard, right? If you're willing to like just sell out like that and be a total piece of shit, like to the like, I don't know. Anyway, it's not real, but he doesn't care. Like he lost to Kamaru Usman and was like, I beat him, and you're like, no, you didn't. You lost, and like and they just stick to it. The same thing with Trump. I had the biggest inauguration ever. No, dude, we can count numbers, bro. You did not. Like Like,
Yeah, we all
and
create
like,
our own reality, but not like that.
Not like that, right? But it's like, don't even blame you. Yours, it happened to be raining. No one wanted to come. Like, Obama's was a beautiful sunny day. So,
Right.
It's too. We're not even comparing apples to apples. So, anyway,
Yeah, and you got to own it in one way.
Yeah,
or
just
another.
own it. So, anyway, back to the health thing, man. I want to hear more about this. You were, no red meat and yada yada. Because like, I don't know. Did you see that? And it's so hard to tell what's real and what's not real these days, right? That thing that they say the government just put out where they said Lucky Charms is healthier than red meat.
Right.
Which I don't know if they actually said that. It's so impossible to know these days, right? Like, I can't imagine that. I mean, like, I have a 9-year-old and he knows Lucky Charms isn't healthier than a steak.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe any smart person who's educated would actually like put that out somewhere, but you never know too. So, when you
Pizza
say you went on your own
don't
journey,
forget.
What's that?
Pizza is a vegetable, and don't you forget
Pizza's a vegetable, right? Yes, man. I wish. I think bacon's its own food group, by the way. So for those people that don't eat pork, bacon, like, it's fine.
Bacon.
I love bacon. Yeah, it's the
best.
It's the best. It's the best. I have a friend who actually said that to me. I stole it from him because he didn't eat pork. And then we were sitting at breakfast eating bacon one day. I was like, dude, what the fuck you doing? He goes, nah, man, bacon's its own food group. And I was like, fuck yeah.
That is totally true.
Yeah. So what was the journey look like? What, you said you were, low cholesterol, no red meat, all that stuff, right? Like,
yeah.
And then what did you do for yourself and how did it work out?
Yeah, so it was that combination of intermittent fasting, not being afraid of fat anymore, and cyclic ketogenic dieting that I started dipping my toes into. And I wanted to see, especially back then, who were the outliers, because I didn't know as much as I wanted to about all of this. Like, I had gotten fat by trying to do the right thing, not like severely overweight or anything, but I was thinking, well, who has been severely overweight, who's conquered this? And I looked to people who had lost over 100 pounds and kept it off for at least 5 years. That's just kind of like a metric that I made for myself. Then I started interviewing them. And that's how I started the podcast. And I interviewed people who were in their late 50s and 60s who were still ripped, running races or with a six-pack. And it's just like, how did you nail this at your age? What are you doing what do you understand that other people don't? And so it was really by exploring all of those different options that I realized that this top-down approach that the doctors were giving us back then and continue to do, and government representatives saying these ridiculous things like Lucky Charms is healthier than red meat and all the rest of it. I still want to see the government representative do that, by the way. Like, I want to see someone come out and like I don't want to see just the chart, because I want to see someone say it is my argument. And I don't know who it was, but some government representative just is making headlines now for saying that obesity is a genetic thing, like pretty much only a genetic thing, right? And there's no diet or exercise that you could do that's going to affect that. Some people are they got a bad deck of cards, they got a bad hand, and they're screwed now because of genetics.
I agree. They're more prone to it. I agree.
Yes.
They're not going to look like Francis Ngannou. Like shredded, jacked, 280 pounds with a 10-pack. Yeah, sure. That's some genetics without a doubt, right? Wouldn't you agree?
I would. Like, I am not Michael Jordan and never will be. But at the same time, I think there is an ideal body composition for each person and different body types as well, right? Where like some people are built to be the skinny, like kind of tall, lanky runners. Who would, I hated it when they beat me, but I'm, 5'9" on a good day. I'm built with more muscle just naturally, and I'm carrying more weight around. Maybe there's a better sport for that, right? Like, so I did, I took up trail running and mountain running and things that needed more power to weight ratio. And I think everyone can kind of do that. You can optimize your body composition. Maybe you're not going to look like Jennifer Aniston or Brad Pitt or whatever, but you can choose the path that's best for whatever your body is built to do. And I think we're all kind of built for different things. But the point is, we need to find that path and not listen to just what we're told, especially if it doesn't jive with reality. I think we need to take on the responsibility of knowing that we can improve our situation, whether we've gained weight or whether we've never run a marathon before or never fought, never done any sort of training. If you start training, you can make your situation better, and your body will also get better over time as long as you maintain that discipline, that consistency, and what have you. So saying that, oh, it's just genetics and you got a bad hand, so don't even try, that's the message that I think is wrong, right? And
well,
that's
I believe
kind
that
of
message is wrong everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Like look, I'm a black Jew, and I've said this a ton of times on this podcast. And so I get free reign at whatever I say.
See, I'm a white guy, so I can't say anything.
Yeah. So, and look, to add to on the Jew end, my grandparents survived the Holocaust. So like, I'm fucking
right.
I'm good. But I believe in, for example, on this, like, telling someone it's not their fault thing. I believe in all of the things that are true. I believe in racism and anti-Semitism and it's holding people back. Yes, I totally believe this. But if you go talk, like I got these black kids that come over my house because my kids play basketball, right? These black kids and they're a little poorer, and if I tell them that, if I tell the individual it's not their fault, and if there's really nothing they can do about it, well then shit, why wouldn't they go sell crack on the corner?
Right.
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know? Why wouldn't they? Instead, I'm buying them books. Instead, I bought them all. They all asked me some questions. I was like, look, I'm going to buy you this book. Here's the book. Go read it. So the same thing with the obese people, right? Okay, you're pre-genetically disposed to be obese. Got it, right? Like, got it. It doesn't mean you have to be.
Yeah. And after doing this podcasting thing for 11 plus years now and talking to so many different people, I haven't tried to keep all of their messaging consistent with like something I have to sell or whatever, right? I'm doing it to explore different ways of going about this. And so I've had people on the podcast who are totally plant-based, totally vegan, people who have lost over 100 pounds, kept it off for 5+ years. A lot of them did that just with diet. I had another guy who saw me on that TV show. He lost 100 pounds with no exercise. He didn't exercise at all. And that's not like even following. He just, like, I recommend that people go out for walks and do some strength training and other sorts of things like that. But he's
so you're like, unbiased with your guest. You're not like, yo, I need a carnivore who's going to have cholesterol at 700. Like that. That's not who, that's not, that's not how you roll.
I've had Paul Saladino and Dr. Sean Baker on the podcast and a whole bunch of carnivores. And yeah, I love hearing what they have to say. And I've interacted with so many of them over the years. And I think we all have to find our own way of going about this. And it doesn't have to stay the same the whole time either. And the biggest lesson that I've learned over the years, and I hope that we've kind of helped spread to other people, that there is more than one way of going about this. And you can get great results as long as you're consistent, diligent, and you stick with it most of the time. And if you're willing to experiment and not just listen and follow, but also experiment, find your own compass for getting through all of this. Because we all crave bacon sometimes. I had to do it on the podcast who ate nothing but bacon for a month. Now he's doing a year-long bacon experiment. His biomarkers improved. I had another person on the podcast who ate nothing but potatoes for a year. And he lost an insane amount of weight and improved his biomarkers.
But let me ask you this question.
I love that.
On what you're saying. 2 questions. My doctor swears, for example, and because I ask him, and I can't go against my doctor because he's been my doc since I was 19 years old and never steered me wrong. Like
That's
never,
cool.
And he's a traditional doctor, but he's into I take TRT, we watch my mark, and all that stuff. But he swears that like Paul Saladino is going to have major problems with cholesterol at 600-700, right? Like he's like, look, it's fine now because it's not a right now problem. He's like the problem is in 30 years, in 20 years, when you're 50, when you're 60. So he's like, it's great now. So how do you deal with this? Like, okay, you look fine and your markers are good now, but what that's going to lead to is big problems.
Yeah. Well, I would contrast that too to what we just see looking around at the general world, people following the advice that's out there. Clearly what most people are doing is not working well for them.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. But I don't think they're listening to the doctor's advice either.
Yeah,
they're going
I
to
think there's
McDonald's every day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of giving up too. But you can try to be healthy and be extremely unhealthy by following the wrong advice too. For example, if you eat too many processed carbs,
right,
and you don't get enough protein, and you don't offset the amount of glucose that's coming into your body by exhausting your glycogen from time to time. If you're not doing that, then all of a sudden this can go sideways on you. But I think it's really important to find these extreme examples of people doing that experimentation, like the carnivores and the vegans out there, and see, 5 years later, 10 years later, are they still doing it? Is it still working for them? Is it worth it for them? Are they missing out on some part of life? Is their heart going to stop beating a few years from now? Have they put on a whole bunch of weight? Whatever it is.
Okay.
And what I've seen is that the more extreme it gets, the less likely they're going to be able to maintain their results over time or maintain their lifestyle over time.
The Liver King's a great example, though, of this.
Oh, God.
Because he just lied. But he just lied.
He totally lied. And
I think but it was obvious. But the problem is it was so obvious that he was lying. But he made hundreds of millions of dollars and got so many people, my friends included, to eat processed bull testicles, bro. Yeah,
dude.
Because that's what he said. Man, it wasn't the processed bull testicles. It's the goddamn steroids.
Yes. 15 grand a month or something.
Yeah, 15 G's a month. Look, I'm on TRT, like I said. I definitely have some natural, this black Jew thing with Eastern European. The two don't mix well for blood. I'm fucked. I have this alpha thalassemia. I don't make enough red blood cells genetically, right? So this has been a problem my whole life. Anyway, dude, come on. I spend $200. I spend $50 a month on my TRT.
Is that all it is? Whoa.
Well, with insurance, because it's insurance.
Yeah.
Because I have an actual problem, right? Like, I'm not going to the low T center. Like I said, I have a doctor who ran these tests and is like, yo, look, go ahead, look at these numbers. You tell me that this isn't fucked up. Like, my hematocrit when I'm not on anything is like 36. It's terrible. And that's in shape, right? That's in shape. That was at the peak of my career when I was really, So
yeah.
Your hematocrit should be way higher than that,
Right.
So my free testosterone naturally was 8.
Was 8?
8. Yeah, 8.
Whoa.
Right? So this is bad,
Yeah. So you were dealt cards. Everyone was, and they're all a little bit different, and we have to massage our daily practices, lifestyle, nutrition, and all the rest of it to dial that in and make sure that it lines up with your goals and where you're honestly at. So being able to track this sort of thing is very helpful. One of the things that I do is, like, after I have a lot of these people on my show and have been doing it for so long, and really, I know that you, and I respect this as well, you don't really do much research on the people you're about to have on the podcast, but I take the opposite approach where it's like, if they wrote a book, I read it. If they wrote 6 books, I'll read like a half dozen books in the weekend before, most of the way through anyway, because I've been a bookworm my whole life. And I really like digging in and researching what each of these people are doing and what their careers have looked like. And for the most part, the people who are the icons in health and fitness have tried almost everything out there. And I like trying a lot of different things too. I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor right now. I've been wearing an Aura ring for many years and Garmin trackers for my runs and things like that. And then tracking the foods that I'm eating, lining it up with what it does to my blood sugar. And it's pretty obvious that some things are better than others. What seems to work well for me is eating less often than I used to, right? So the 16-8 type fast, or even one meal a day with backloading the carbs, tends to work really well. The people who are eating nothing but meat and water, I've seen so many of them in the past few years, fascinate me. I'm like, how could you even do that? lifestyle wise, right? If you have a family or if you're eating out or whatever, are you really just going out and getting 5 hamburgers and that's it? You know, and you're doing that for every meal? And yeah, the answer is yeah for a lot of people. But it doesn't feel quite right for me. I know I feel better when I get some greens in, when I get some fiber, even eating some oats. That saying like you're feeling your oats. I feel them, right? Like you get a little boost when you have foods that work well for you, that don't drive you completely out of whack. So I think it's important to honor that and not just go after whatever the craziest fad is, especially if they're being driven by people who are complete frauds lying about it at the same time. Because I totally agree with the eating nose to tail. I think eating organ meats is a great thing. We've been talking about that for a long time.
Right.
Lots of bone broth, connective tissue and stuff like that. But that is not the point. That's just what our grandparents knew that they should do, you know, because it helps heal us and it helps rebuild us from the inside out. Not because you need to chomp on testicles in order to be at peak health all the time. It just doesn't work like that.
So now let me ask you this question. Like my doctor, and I'm just using me as the example because, you know, I think that's the only one that I really know the whole way. He's like what you just said, oats and greens and fiber and some meat. This is what he tells me to eat. Like he's not like low fat or low carb or so. Do you not think that the most sensible doctors are trying to tell them like to eat, are trying to tell us to eat like a well-balanced meal, a well-balanced lifestyle. Sorry. The problem is we're just not fucking doing it. Like,
I think that is, you know, yes, because the doctors that I was following, this is all the way back in like 2007, 2008. And even before that, like when I was in college, when the common thinking around all of this back then was you need to avoid fat, you need to avoid red meat, and you need to avoid dietary cholesterol. It wasn't like, let's see what you're eating for breakfast and let's make it a healthy breakfast. It's like, make sure that you don't eat these things. If you eat these things, you're going to die or your heart's going to stop beating. So that a lot of good doctors in the past 10 or 15 years have become far more open to the idea that you can eat what I consider a balanced diet, which includes meats and veggies and some amount of carbs. You know, that's what a balanced diet is. A balanced diet doesn't mean never eat red meat and never eat dietary cholesterol, which means you can never eat eggs or even have dairy and things like that. No. It's like, look at the things that we've been doing for decades and generations before we had all these problems that we have today. Look at what they were eating. And, you know, my grandma and great grandma, they were all about cooking in lard that had natural sources of vitamin D back then. And they lived until their 90s and maintained a good body composition as a family back in the day.
What was that?
Eating. What's that?
Go ahead. Sorry. Go, you finish.
Well, anyway,
eating
lots of foods for
lard.
A long time. Yeah. Eating, not being afraid of fat. You need a source of calories. You need a source of fat that's clean and healthy. And so trying to focus on the things that you should eat. Like it sounds like you have a really good doctor, and there are, I would argue, even more good doctors out there today than there have been in years past who are willing to accept the fact that people are going to eat bacon sometimes, and that can be part of a healthy diet, I believe, even though it is a slightly processed meat, if that makes sense.
Look, a healthy life.
A healthy life.
Right? Like,
yes.
like I don't want to, my friend says this, I don't want to die with a piece of fucking kale in my mouth. Like if that's how it rolls out, then that's how it rolls out.
Yep.
And I like kale, you know?
Yeah.
But goddamn, a tomahawk ribeye to share with my friends, a 3-inch thick bitch, you know, is delicious if that person cooks it right. So
yes,
like that's okay too. You can't do it every night, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have ice cream. I'm gonna do it. I love ice cream, but I can't do it every night, right? Like, it's you know, like there's, you know, I can have ice cream sometimes, not too often, sometimes, you know, and that's okay. And cake, you know, I think so. This was the question I was going to ask when I interrupted you a second ago. Was look, I think what changed is like Panda Express, and I think what changed is you know, there was that documentary. I don't know if it was Super Size Me or the McDonald's documentary about the founder, where they were like, look, the fries used to be cooked in this lard, And sure,
tallow, I think.
it's tallow, right? And sure, it has a ton of saturated fat in it. But the way that it cooked the fries, you only needed this small little bag and you had like 8 fries.
Yeah.
Now we cook it in a quote unquote healthier oil, but you supersize that bitch.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Nobody needs a supersized fry, do they?
And actually, it's interesting you bring that up because I've been running these continuous glucose monitoring experiments and trying different foods to see what they do to me over the past couple of years, actually. And one of the more recent ones a few months ago is we went and got some double cheeseburgers with bacon. Of course, we were on the road. And so they gave us a free... Let's go. That's our road food, man. Especially when we need...
Let's go.
Well, we haven't eaten much that day. It's like some red meat, a little bit of cheese, a little bit of bacon is where it's at. We don't eat the buns, though. So even we'll do this sometimes.
I don't even like the bun anymore, to be honest with you. But anyway, go ahead.
No, it's like once you kick it out, you realize that it's the worst part of the burger in every way. But anyway, they gave us, because we got this burger anyway, or these couple of burgers, they gave us those mini fries. Just, I don't know how many fries it was, maybe a little more than a dozen. It was a small thing that they would just give away for free because we don't order fries. But anyway, I'm like, all right, so they came with it, and I ate the whole little pack on an empty stomach, which was really, it wasn't much more than a handful. It was a tiny little amount. And my blood sugar went straight up and straight down after that. And I got the shakes and the jitters. My wife did too. And this is totally not normal for us. When I looked at the numbers, that was the thing that torpedoed my blood sugar more than anything that I ate over the course of many months, including cake, cookies, chips, like drinking straight up sugar, no matter what it was. Nothing was as bad as this tiny amount
drinking straight soda.
Fries.
Have you had any soda? Did you had any you had soda in that time?
I had some amount of soda. I didn't have 60 grams all at once, but I had 30 grams all at once, and then added a couple of cookies to it and a couple other things.
Yeah, but that's a lot of sugar.
It's a lot of sugar. Yeah, I've had in one sitting 50 or 100 grams of sugar, and I've tried experimenting by blunting it by eating fat or proteins at the same time, seeing what that does. Nothing was worse than French fries fried in that industrial oil. And we've made a whole bunch of different potatoes and sweet potatoes in our own fats, the tallows and the lards, avocado oil, coconut oil, things like that. It didn't have the same effect.
So you don't think it's the potato, you think it's the oil?
I think it's a bit of both. If you if you fry potato, it has a fundamentally different effect on your body than if you slow cook a potato. And if you hydrate potatoes and starches, like oatmeal, for example, with water or milk or something that's a liquid, and cook it low and slow, then that tends to work pretty well for my body. It's like I shortly after a few days after eating those French fries, I had scalloped potatoes, which are covered in cheese. So they were slow cooked, but they were boiled in water first, just from the local barbecue joint. I had a bunch of brisket and a bunch of these potatoes. Barely made my blood sugar budge, even though it's exactly the same food and the macros might be the same. Had a completely different effect on the body. So I think that's where a lot of this is going. And many people don't really accept that, including nutritionists. They're like, oh, you ate oats? Oats are oats. Potatoes are potatoes. But how you cook these things makes a massive difference on what they do to your body. And to your point, the oils being swapped out in the 80s and 90s, and certainly now, we all have these junk oils, industrial oils, which are made to be, they have no real flavor, which makes them even more addictive, right? If you have something that's fried in bacon fat or fried in tallow, you know what you're eating. It's got flavor to it, and it tends to fill you up. Saturated fat, I think, fills us up a lot more than these junk oils.
I got 3 more questions. One is for you particularly, and then the last 2 are for, I always ask them.
Anywhere you want to go.
Yeah. So you said you do your own research and you find what works for you. And I agree to a point. I just want to hear your take on it a little bit because God, it's I don't think anybody does their own research, right? We view things on the internet, right? Like no one's actually doing research. So, and we listen to the people that we like. For example, the Liver King, right? For example, I'm a Joe Rogan fan, but I've used this example a couple times on this topic. when he got COVID, and he said he took all these cocktails, right? And one of them was ivermectin. Man, Joe Rogan went to a doctor, paid $10,000 to his doctor, and had it prescribed at the human dose and yada, yada. Well, some fucking hillbillies, a lot of hillbillies actually, in like Nebraska on their horse farms or whatever, their cow farms, and they had fucking horses. When it was like, oh shit, I got some fucking ivermectin, I got COVID, hospital, right? So, how do we do this in this day and age of the internet and not fuck ourselves? Because there's a lot of untruth on the internet that is it's just like the Liver King. He's total bullshit. He's total bullshit. There's no reason to fucking shove testicle balls in your mouth unless you want to and like have a couple. But like if it's like your sexual thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just so I can make sure I get the question right. What is the direct question? Before I get too caught up on eating testicles again.
How do we figure it out for ourselves? Because it's so hard. You go on the internet and it's not really going on the internet. It's all based on your predisposed biases that these algorithms show us. And they go, okay, you are a right-wing gun dude. So therefore, you're going to fall in line with not getting vaxxed, taking ivermectin, and yada, yada, yada. When you search these things, it's not like none of us have this real information that's coming our way. Yeah. And then you'll see your first 10 articles. So you go, it must be true.
It only reinforces what the internet wants you to know, or what the algorithm wants you to know. And
so that they can sell advertising.
Yes.
So that Google can sell advertising and Instagram and Facebook.
Dude, and one of the biggest reasons, and people don't realize this, that fads and trends take off on the internet is because it's cheap words for the marketers to buy. That's why carnivore took off back in the day more than anything else, is because these marketers with supplement companies and with other things to sell you would buy up these words. And like no vegan author is going to be buying up the word carnivore or the word bacon or the word testicles, especially. Who's buying those words? It's the people with something to push and an agenda. And that is what is driving the entire health industry on the internet. That's what's driving your Google results. That's what's driving the podcasts that are presented to you. So, yeah, I think it's almost impossible for anyone to do real research these days. And I use that term somewhat liberally now, and include the N=1 type research where you're experimenting on yourself by doing self-tracking, continuous glucose monitoring, you looking at your different biomarkers and health metrics, seeing how your activity lines up with that and your nutrition, all the rest of it, your training. But the true definition of research is doing the studies yourself. But even those, I went to an Ivy League college. I was involved in more than a few studies, some of them as a participant in the studies, and we ran a few. And even those can be highly manipulated and are often driven by funding that necessitates that they get a certain result. And if they don't get that result, then it's thrown away and you never hear about it. So it's a dangerous world when it comes to trying to learn on the internet. So what I recommend most people do is go back in time and read old school fundamental bodybuilding books, fitness books from decades past, from 100 years ago. See what they were saying in the 1700s in their best-selling diet books, because it is freaking fascinating. There is nothing new. The vegan versus all meat diet thing, that argument has been going on for more than a century. It's not new. The internet presents everything like it's new. But this stuff has been going on for a long time. There's quite a bit of research that happened in the decades previous to now. But even more so, it's like the difference between a true expert with training and experience and someone who's just an Instagram butt model is harder and harder to identify these days. So for you, I think I saw it.
No, it's not. Everyone thinks it's the fucking internet butt model, bro, because she's the one who shows up on my feed all the time. Because I'm a 40-year-old heterosexual married male, right? So she's fucking constantly, her butt is constantly staring at me. So I'm going to listen to her.
But you don't want to learn jujitsu from her, right?
No, I do not.
You want someone You want someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And for people coming up and trying to do research or whatever, it's difficult for them, I think, the newbies, to tell the difference between those things. Or it's just too easy to get sucked into the new hypey thing. But I would encourage people to go to the old, tried, and tested techniques. I mean,
it's so interesting what you said about like how we're still arguing the same things. I'm rereading the book Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And I just reread it. I'm done. And, you know, this book was written in like the 50s or the 40s, right after the Depression, right? Long time ago. And he's talking about how our politicians are bought and yada, and you can't trust, you know, and there's this war. And you're like, dude, we're talking about the same shit 80 years later, right? It's, you know, so they thought it then and we think it now. But we're like, look what's changed since the 50s. It's like, really, go read a book from the 50s about this subject. And they're saying the same exact thing. So,
yeah. So go back in time and look at the people who have been able to maintain their careers and their advice over decades. And you'll find that this stuff isn't all that complicated. It's more a matter of having the discipline to put the right practices and training and then strategize your nutrition around that in your own life. And it's a little bit different for everyone, but there are so many ulterior motives on the internet when you type in any word that it's almost already gone away from you. But also listen to actual people. I think that's one of the reasons that podcasting is attractive to a lot of people, is because you can, if you listen closely, you can tell the difference between the people who have been doing this for many years and have that experience to share with other people. You can contrast that to the Instagram butt models who are just like, hey, look at my butt. And that's like, they don't have much more to say.
It's a nice butt.
Aside
We're not
from,
going to lie, right?
Program.
It's a nice
Don't you
butt.
like my butt?
It's a nice butt. It's hard, right? And they know sex sells. It always has. It's a nice butt. Most, you know, there's a lot of nice butts out there. So it's a problem.
There are.
All right, last two questions. And this is not to like toot my own horn. It's to get people to understand the idea of, you know, different ROIs and things like that. So, man, I'm not in health and fitness. I'm barely in fitness. I'm in martial arts. You have a big podcast and you've done a ton of things. This podcast isn't going to move the needle at all for you. You know, like if you go on Rogan, that's going to move the needle, right? If you go on Jocko or Tim Ferriss or somebody like that, it's going to without a doubt move the needle. Why the hell did you spend an hour with me, especially with all this bullshit with my figuring out the technology? Why don't you just bounce?
Because I learned from you. I love talking to people who it sounds weird, but people are just like, why don't you go on Rogan? They've been telling me that for over 10 years. They're just like, get this guy on Rogan. And it's like, I really don't care. I don't need to be bigger right now, or be more in the public sphere. If it happens and it feels right, or we run across each other, or he wants me on or something, then totally, that would be great. But I try not to decide how I spend my own time based upon how big the platform is of the person I'm collaborating with. It's more just like, who is this person and what are they into? And the fact that you have been a top level fighter and someone who trains other fighters and has been involved in this world that's in many ways alien to my own, and can inform the world that I'm in, I think that's freaking awesome. And I also love supporting other people who have their own podcast, because I know how hard it is to do it and just get it set up to begin with, to do it every week and every interview when they change all the plugins and make sure that it doesn't work or the internet goes out or whatever. And I want to honor that, because people did that for me when I first started too. I had Tim Ferriss on my podcast like 3 times in a couple of years before he ever even had a podcast, and other people like Rob Wolf and Mark Sisson and Tony Horton, Bob Harper, and like all of these people in health who I'm just like, man, I grew up watching P90X and now I'm just hanging out with Tony Horton. This is freaking awesome. But a lot of them, even the big names, they don't have a big podcast either. Most podcasts are small. So it's more about, who do you want to have an uninterrupted, deep conversation with that's open-ended about anything for 60 minutes straight? Because that doesn't happen in the real world. And I'm honored by people who would have me on in that context to just kind of shoot the shit and see what happens. So that's why I'm here, to learn.
Awesome. Last question. I believe everyone has a unique gift and power that they have that they go out and they give to the world, and then the world, when they give that gift correctly and when they actually discover it, I think most people's problem is they don't discover it. The world gives you back so much more. What's your power?
I think asking questions, as long as I'm allowed to. That was an interesting one because that's why my podcast took off. Is I love asking questions. I love doing the research. And then in the past 3 or so years, the people who asked questions didn't fare too well. They weren't the ones who were rewarded for asking questions or being intellectually curious anymore. So being able to maintain that curiosity in the face of the negative attention that sometimes that can bring, or the I don't know what you would even call the last 3 years, but it wasn't research and it wasn't all that educational for a lot of people.
Well, it was called it was called a pandemic that none of us have ever experienced before, and people got fucking stupid in every sense of the way.
Yeah. And so to get through that, we need to start asking questions again. We need for that to be okay, and part of the scientific process. The scientific process is reinforced by questioning. It's driven by questioning. And so I would encourage everyone out there to ask a few more questions and ask what's working for you. But I don't know. It's interesting that you ask me that question, like, what is that talent? Because I think about it all the time. Why are you here? What are you doing? What would be the most useful to other people? Because if I didn't want to be that useful, I would just play music all day. And I tried that and I have done it. But what's the most fulfilling? What's the most useful for other people? I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of both. I think it's combining everything of what you do into one, because I wouldn't be able to ask these questions if I didn't spend so much time being that musician and living that life before all of this. So yeah, I think it's honoring your own path and being willing to be open to that path changing over time.
Cool. All right, man. Tell everyone where they can reach out to you, find you on the internet, follow your stuff, your podcasts, plug it away.
Right on. Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, you can find me at fatburningman.com. Also, Fat Burning Man is the name of the podcast. And then abeljames.com has some of our virtual reality videos and a lot of my music and more artistic, crazier stuff. But most people listening will probably be most interested in the Fat Burning Man.
All right. Abel, I appreciate you coming on, homie. Thanks for dealing with my technological bullshit. I know we had a problem there. Did the screen go black for you? Did we stay on picture the whole time?
I can still see your beautiful mouth.
Yes. So all right. We worked it out. Let's go.
Good. This is fun.
All right. This was good. So thanks so much for coming on. And everyone listening, please, as always, Abel has his unique gift and power that he goes out and he gives to the world. And I have my own unique gift and power that I go out and give to the world. Please don't go out in the world and try to be Abel. Please don't go out in the world and try to be me. Everyone, go out there and find your own power.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found something useful that you can take and implement into your life. Don't forget to head over to wherever you are listening to this podcast and leave a review. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, go follow me on social media at FireMarshal205 on Instagram. Leave a comment, anything that you would like there. And as always, if you think this would be useful for somebody else that you know for their life, send it their way. That would be greatly appreciated. That's it for this episode, guys. I hope you all have a great day and you go step into that power so that you can give your purpose to the world.